In capitalism, companies and individuals compete in the market to survive by offering more efficient or attractive goods and services. In nature, animals and plants compete for food, territory, or mates. In capitalism, stronger companies dominate the market while weaker ones are eliminated. In nature, only the species best adapted to the environment survive. In capitalism, nations and companies compete for resources such as labor, capital, and energy. In nature, living beings compete for water, food, and nesting sites. In capitalism, division of labor increases efficiency and leads to economic growth. In nature, symbiotic relationships such as bees and flowers or gut bacteria and hosts bring mutual benefits. In capitalism, companies that introduce new technologies or systems gain large profits. In nature, mutations or new behaviors give certain individuals an advantage. In capitalism, wealth and power are concentrated, creating inequality. In nature, predators at the top of the food chain dominate resources, while lower species survive with limited ones. In capitalism, regulations are needed to prevent monopolies and environmental destruction. In nature, populations are regulated by predators or environmental factors to maintain balance. Capitalism can be seen as a miniature version of nature, with competition, adaptation, and symbiosis. However, unlike nature, capitalism is based on the assumption of endless growth, which makes sustainability a challenge. Capitalism needs regulation to prevent monopolies and crises. In nature, ecosystems self-regulate through predator-prey balance and environmental limits. Just as capitalism has niche markets, nature has ecological niches where species specialize to survive. Global corporations can overwhelm local markets, just as invasive species disrupt ecosystems. Debt creates risk and dependency in capitalism. In nature, predator-prey relationships create similar cycles of vulnerability. Capitalist economies experience booms and recessions. In nature, animal populations rise and fall with climate and resource cycles. Capitalism is guided by ideologies like free market and profit maximization. Nature is driven instead by instincts of survival and reproduction.
Just as capitalism leaves some in poverty, weaker individuals in nature fail to access enough resources and perish. Welfare systems and antitrust laws protect the weak in capitalism. In nature, defense mechanisms like camouflage, poison, or group defense serve the same purpose. All economic activity takes place on the ground of capitalism. If the soil is fertile, fair laws and opportunities, companies and nation can thrive. If the soil is barren, growth is limited. Each mountain represents a country, and its size or height reflects GDP. Large mountains, like the US or China, dominate the landscape, while smaller mountains represent smaller economies. Every tree is a company. Giant trees represent corporations, while saplings symbolize startups. Diversity of species reflects the variety of industries in the economy. Clusters of trees form forests, just as groups of companies form industries. A rich, balanced forest represents a healthy, diversified economy. Clouds floating above the mountains store and distribute resources, data, computing power. They serve multiple mountains, just like cloud services connect across countries. Rain falling from clouds nourishes trees, symbolizing how investments and funding allow companies to grow. A drought means fewer opportunities for expansion. Rivers carry water, money, from mountains to valleys and into the ocean, just as financial markets move capital across industries and borders. Larger predators dominate smaller ones, just like big corporations absorb or drive out smaller firms in a competitive market. Winds move clouds and spread seeds, just like the Internet spreads information and connects economies globally. Spring represents growth, summer prosperity, autumn slowdown, and winter recession. The cycle never stops. A sudden wildfire destroys parts of the forests, just as a financial crisis can wipe out companies and reshape the economy overnight. Rocks and cliffs symbolize regulations and laws that shape the terrain of the economy. Flowers on the trees symbolize successful products that attract consumers like bees. Fallen leaves and dead trees represent bankrupt companies or industries in decline. The ocean at the base of the mountains represents the global economy connecting all nations. Earthquakes represent disruptive innovations that reshape the entire landscape. Seeds carried by the wind symbolize startups and new ideas spreading across markets. Soil erosion represents corruption or mismanagement that weakens the foundation of the system. Parasites represent monopolistic practices or exploitative systems draining others' resources. Seasonal migrations of animals represent shifts in labor markets and global workforce mobility. Natural disasters like floods represent sudden market collapses or hyperinflation. The underground water table represents hidden capital reserves and savings. Volcanoes represent disruptive geopolitical events that reshape economies suddenly. Moss and small plants on rocks represent micro-businesses thriving in limited niches. The night sky with stars represents visionary goals and future innovations guiding direction. Predator-prey balance represents the equilibrium between competition and cooperation. Fog represents uncertainty in the market, obscuring visibility for businesses. Animal herds represent consumer groups whose collective choices shape demand. Fossils in the ground represent outdated industries that once dominated but are now gone. The changing tides represent fluctuations in currency exchange rates. A mountain range represents economic blocks or alliances connecting multiple nations. Earthquakes deep underground represent hidden systemic risks in the economy. Rainbows after storms represent renewed optimism following a crisis. Mountain goats represent agile startups able to thrive in risky terrain. Meteor impacts represent rare black swan events that change everything suddenly. Caves in mountains represent tax havens or hidden reserves. Seasonal flowers represent short-term trends or fads in the economy. Predatory vines represent hostile takeovers that strangle existing companies. Hibernating animals represent companies conserving resources during downturns. Landslides represent sudden bankruptcies that sweep away smaller businesses. Natural borders, like rivers and mountains, represent tariffs and trade barriers. Beehives represent corporate headquarters coordinating the work of many. Rivers merging represent corporate mergers creating stronger flows of capital.